Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 101th episode of the Spiritual Brainstorm, or 101st, actually. That sounds better. I actually like the number of this episode because 101 is, a number that signals that you're sort of covering the basics of something. And in this episode, I'd like to revisit the concepts of nothing, everything, and what's in between. So it is a back to basics kind of episode, which is exactly what I wanted to do. So that's quite nice. So one thing that the reason why I wanted to revisit the topic of everything and nothing is because I've watched a few, um, speakers online. For instance, I really like Kurt and his Theory of Everything podcast. You can find it on YouTube as the Toe channel. And he invites a lot of interesting people to discuss all kinds of theories about the universe. And there's always this nothing and everything and infinity and all this stuff and the absolute and the relative. And sometimes it gets really mixed up, especially when we're starting to assign characteristics to the absolute. Like, for instance, will or creation. We use these terms, and it sometimes just doesn't click when we're talking about the absolute. So I wanted to go and revisit these terms a bit. I don't even, maybe there's only one S anyway. Um, so everything and nothing, and everything, or all encompassing, whatever you want to call it. So I think I came up with a little bit more of a nuance of how actually creation springs into existence. Creation as in form and experience. Form and experience, that's really important because nothing and everything are in the realm of existence. And existence itself springs from non existence. Basically, the what the fundamental building blocks of form and experience spring into existence from paradoxes because they're beyond duality, beyond concept, beyond many things that are human. And then once you exit from existence into experience, then your reality can then be nice and orderly, and you don't have to deal with those paradoxes only in your mind. Um, because right here, when you're touching a glass or interacting with reality, you don't have this existence, non existence kind of experience, like your glass doesn't cease to exist suddenly and it just disappears from your hand or something. There's this feeling of experience in our reality as being rather smooth. It's not like your dreams where you can jump from one scene to another with seemingly no cause and effect kind of relationship between those two scenes, or things that are happening. It's really quite stable as reality. So it's just a simple paradox of non-existence is the ultimate it's the ultimate thing that cannot not exist, basically non-existence. But then if non-existence exists, then you have a paradox because non-existence is still something that exists, and so that means that existence basically springs from non-existence. And again, here I'm using linear thinking or when you have a sort of order in where things go. Like, for instance, first you have non-existence, then existence. But these concepts usually are tied and intricately tied that they sort of spring into existence or emerge simultaneously. You have the idea of simultaneity and of fusion of concepts, which means existence and non-existence are one. And just because when you have a consciousness, it can only be aware of the existence side of the coin, of course, because how can you be aware of non existence? In order for you to be aware of non existence, you would have to exist and observe non existence. Doesn't make sense. So, just because only existence can be experienced and observed doesn't mean that non existence doesn't exist. It's just that it's a non experienceable and non yeah, you just cannot experiment it, you cannot, but there's still two things that are tied together. And then following that same line of reasoning, once you have existence, and the other thing that cannot not exist is of course nothing, and nothing then has certain properties. You have to discover the properties. Okay, if nothing exists, where does it exist? Where? And so you have infinite space. And how does it occupy that space? How does nothing occupy it? And then you have the concept of the circle, as you may know, and circle of infinite dimensions. So you have a circle in 2D, but then in 3D it's a sphere. Then in 4D it's hypersphere. And you can go on like this into infinity. And then nothing meets itself, which means that since its size is irrelevant, a circle can be infinitely big, infinitely small. It doesn't really matter. It's the same. I mean, there's no dimensions to a circle. There's always infinity within the circle. If this expands that way and that way, and then this point of the circle meets that point, and they don't know that they are one and the same thing, then nothing meets nothing, basically. It's as if a part of nothing meets another part of nothing. And then they play this game where they're like, are you me, or am I you, or are we two different things? And that interaction then makes the circle of nothing enter into a vibration. But of course, due to perfect symmetry, for every vibration, there's a vibration of opposite phase, which means that this circle of nothing that enters into vibration spontaneously by interacting with itself cancels itself out at every single point of its interaction with itself and goes back to being a perfect circle of nothing. And once it enters into vibration, then everything exists as a vibration. And again, nothing and everything. The reason why they're one and the same is because this process of nothing meeting itself, entering spontaneously into vibrations, which contains the information, info, energy, and vibration of all that is and never will be, because of course, this circle of infinite dimensions spontaneously sort of generates everywhere all the information that will ever exist of any scene or whatever. And then all of this spontaneously cancels itself out, goes back to nothingness, and these two switch around infinitely fast, which means that nothing and everything are fused together again. And I've again told you the story in a linear fashion where you have a nice cause and effect, but ultimately, because they happen simultaneously and they are almost superimposed one on the other, they are together forever. Nothing and everything are one and the same, just as existence and non-existence, bound together, fused together, in this other realm that is not the realm of experience. And the process of creation is happens basically between those two. It's almost as if consciousness, this infinite consciousness, um, was trying to was it sometimes it basically focuses on and wonders what is in between, what is here, what is in between nothing and everything, what happens between these 2 points, and it focuses on that point sometimes, and that focus, that observation sends, it's like sort of an energy that then creates, let me just go to another slide. The focus of this infinite consciousness on that one point of what exists between everything that I'll express as infinity and nothing, zero, and that normally alternate infinitely fast and therefore are one and the same forever. And they are almost, it's like as if this was a perfectly calm and still ocean of existence, where you have everything that will ever exist as pure information, but that cannot be experienced because, of course, it all appears all at once and then disappears just as fast. And they're fused together forever, and they're perfectly fine like this because there's nothing you can really do about. I mean, yeah, I mean, I've already discussed the fact that when you experience everything infinitely fast, it's the same as experiencing nothing because for every experience, there's a counter experience. So it's the same as if you were born while dying. It's the same as if you were sleeping while running. And I mean, it just doesn't make sense. For every choice, there's a counter choice. For every color of the sky, there's another color of the sky. So when you know, for instance, that the sky is all colors, it's the same as knowing that the sky is no color, or you don't know what color it is. Knowing everything is the same as knowing nothing. Experiencing everything is the same as experiencing nothing. That is what is quite misunderstood in the world of the absolute. And of course, I mean, this idea that there's will to create something in particular is also quite illusory in my mind. Because when you are everything, there is no will to create anything specific. Why would you? It's like, for instance, imagine that you have everything, or that you literally are everything. Then there is no want. You only want that which you don't have. And what this infinite consciousness wants is to know what is in between here. And that in between is what it is not. That is, it is not everything and it is not nothing. And what is not everything and not nothing is the relative. That is where we are in the world of form. Because the absolute cannot be a temporary form. It cannot be a now, for instance, a now moment. Because the now is every now. I mean, right now, as you're listening to this video, you don't know what I'm going to say in 10 minutes, or where this video is going to lead, because you are in the relative, and you are in a limited kind of. You're receiving information. You're living your life. You're evolving. These are all experiences of limitedness, which do not exist in the absolute. In what exists, and this is, of course, experience here. And so, what is the first thing then that this infinite consciousness, the I am, notices about what can possibly exist between everything and nothing? And that is where we go and look at and examine the flower of life. Because the flower of life, in my mind, my interpretation at least, represents this perfect um, combination of representing nothingness, which is, oops, these circles. And you see, you have plenty of circles here. I mean, I'm just going to draw two of them that meet each other. This circle meets itself. It doesn't know it's itself. Of course, it's meeting itself. And then this is their points of interaction. And you can see that the um, the way that this circle sort of is bent creates a vibration within it. And you can follow this and you can make a vibration out of it. This is one phase, of course. This is one phase. And then this is the other phase, the opposite phase. And this is the balance. This is quote unquote the balance that is reached between nothing and everything. Everything is this vibration, and then nothing is those circles. But then what springs out of that? If these two alternate infinitely fast, what emerges out of it is the structure of space and, incidentally, of form, the beginning of form in space. And that's something that Nassim Haramein talks about, for instance. Haramein, in his 64-star tetrahedron, a sort of figure and geometrical figure, because that is kind of the result of what is in between nothing and everything. And this is what it looks like. So you see, still have this flower of life here. Oops. Flower of life in the background. And then from that, you have these triangles that emerge. Now notice, it's not as simple, of course, but when you simplify this, if these two waves cancel each other out, then what you're left with is triangle. Oops. Triangles. Plenty of little triangles. And this is what it looks like in 3D. Oops. And here's another illustration of it. And for the sake of the illustration, I've done this thing in red here. That's me. I've added that. Of course, that triangle doesn't fit with the other ones, but it's just to tell you, like, what exists between infinity and nothingness is the structure of what Nassim Haramein calls like the structure of space-time, the structure of our reality, the geometrical, kind of shape that underpins form in the relative, in the world of experience, in the world of form. But so going back to, because this is really important, this idea. So this idea of the still kind of ocean of existence. When this infinite I am focuses on that which is it's not at some point, it's almost like there's like this bubble that emerges from this still ocean of existence and then just goes wandering about. And that bubble carries, the energy it carries is not linked to any kind of measurements in physics or whatever, or the density of this point before the Big Bang or whatever. It is linked to the intensity of the focus of this infinite consciousness on that point between infinity and nothing, how intensely the I am um, sort of observed what was happening between nothing and infinity. So it's almost as if just by focus, just by its focus, just by like it's the act of observation and focusing your attention on that specific point. If it focused, like for instance, let's count in seconds, even if it doesn't make sense, like it would focus its attention on what exists between zero and infinity and what it is not for 2 seconds, that would equate to 100 billion years worth of energy for the Big Bang, for instance. I mean, it just doesn't make sense to talk like that, but it's that idea. It's that the time that I am spent, the I am present spent on focusing on what was in between instead of just focusing on what it was, determines how much energy you have or how much vibration or how much information you have to start to work with, basically. And then what happens is that that energy then also inherits the quality of observation, of consciousness of the I am, but that consciousness is focused on observing itself. So in previous videos, I talk about the idea that everything observes everything else, and that existence springs from the mutual observation of everything. So you watch the table watches you, the chair watches you. I mean, even if it sounds ridiculous to you, everything observes everything in this universe. And the simple act of observation, the simple act of focusing your attention on something, that something sort of takes your energy, your consciousness, like this I am, that you've inherited. You've inherited a tiny little piece of the energy and focus of the I am. It transferred that focus energy onto you as a part of, this I am, what exists between zero and everything. And then you distill that energy. You use that energy every time you observe something, every time you watch the room around you, every time you look at somebody else, every time you observe a movie, anytime you observe, anytime you're sort of conscious and you're observing things, you are giving out energy to that which you observe and feeding it with conscious energy for it to sort of continue existing in the realm of experience, of course, in our relative reality, in the world of form. And so everything observes everything else. And this kind of evolves out into like being a very complex universe, with planets and human beings in it and plenty of other things. And so long as they're mutually observing each other, it evolves, of course, but it never returns to the realm of pure existence or the absolute. But when it starts sort of to focus its attention back on the absolute through, for instance, humans that reach a certain level of consciousness, then it can bring in new, fresh energy into this bubble and make it expand even further beyond the initial sort of focus from the I am for that brief, tiny little speck of time that the I am observed itself and observed what it was not. Because it is not limited. It is not experience. It is not form. That is what the I am is not. Um, and finally, when does this kind of pop? When every single observer in this bubble stops observing something inside of it, but starts observing, what's not even on the outside, but basically the it starts turning its attention solely on the absolute. And the absolute can do absolutely nothing about this creation. It has absolutely no power whatsoever in busting that bubble, because that bubble is self maintained by the act of mutual observation of all of these points that have the illusion of being just a human or just a planet or just an atom or whatever, observing each other with the initial attention and focus energy that the I am put into asking that question: what it is not. What am I not? What is between this infinity and zero, which is what I am, basically, everything and nothing at the same time. Um, and once it gives that energy to this initial little bubble, it cannot take it back. And of course, this bubble, there are many bubbles like that. And that's what we would call the multiverse in our sort of language, of course. And these multiverses can then start create links um, in order for them to evolve further to the point where there is just nothing more for consciousness to learn or to do or to grow besides going outside and looking at, back and focusing back its attention solely on zero and infinity. And then all of this just pops like, like the bubbles that you blow into the wind, and then eventually just go pop. But of course, this is not something we should be afraid of, because as humans, I mean, right now, none of us is at the level where it focuses solely on infinity and zero. We're still focused on paying bills, our lives, our wives, our friends, our, what we want to eat. And all of that is perfectly fine, of course. Absolutely fine, and absolutely no problem with that. Because from the point of view of the absolute, again, this is beyond good and evil. What it is basically, if you really want to compare, it's as if you were a person that is sitting in a movie theater and you're watching the most exquisite movies with the biggest realism ever on that screen, and you're just showering what you're looking at with love, as much love as you can, because it's fantastic. All of the actors are so realistic, they're playing so well. I mean, look at how well you're acting out all of the moments in your life. You're not faking any of it. I mean, when you have a very serious disease, you act it out all perfectly. You're miserable, you're crying, um, you're sad, you're angry, you're this and that. When you're fired from your work, you're completely depressed, and all of that is genuine. All of that is we're all basically actors, and we're all Hollywood stars from the perspective of the absolute, which again cannot has just is just fascinated basically with those bubbles that spring spontaneously, may I add, kind of spontaneously, from just wondering what is it that I'm not, and then just observing it, because these creation, because this is where this creation is, observing how it kind of evolves and giving it as much love and support as it can, because don't forget, when you're everything, there's nothing you can subtract from infinity. There's no minus here. You cannot take anything out of infinity. And so you're just edging this on as much as it will go. And then it's up to the actors themselves to sort of at one point realize, okay, actually, I was created by the one that is sitting in this movie theater, and I can go and join him in a seat and enjoy me watching the movie for all eternity if I want to. Until such point as again you focus your attention on that which you are not, because I don't know, for whatever reason, I think it's just like, yeah, it's something almost spontaneous that will eventually happen. Is you'll wonder what's between zero and infinity, and you'll wonder what is it that I'm not, and then you'll end up creating those bubbles of existence, of experience. Sorry, of existence, no, of experience that will have a life of their own, and that you really have no control over except sending love and support and nurturing them. In order for them to be the most rich, complex, entertaining, sophisticated experience possible. And so I think that's kind of all that I wanted to say, but it's really not trying to assign any attributes to the absolute that it doesn't have, and understanding how this sort of process of creation and co-creation thereafter happens. Because then once you are immersed in this movie, then you have the opportunity, if you turn your attention back to the absolute, to start a process of co-creation rather than being a passive kind of actor that is being pushed in the back by limiting beliefs, outdated ideologies, and paradigms, like this idea that cause and effect and science, and we're just robots that are that have no free will and that are bound by the laws of cause and effect. Because understand that this realm right here is the realm of the causeless cause. It is a place where sort of everything that exists is its own cause and its own consequence. And cause and effect basically are fused together again. Like everything is fused together into oneness. Here I'm separating them artificially, of course, because infinity and nothingness are just one. And yeah, so I hope that was kind of clear. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. I hope this was interesting, and talk to you in the next video.